They arrested a black Marine sniper, but what a 4-star general did in court shocked everyone. He didn't speak a word, not when they cuffed him, not when they dragged him into the small-town courtroom wearing faded jail blues and shackles. His eyes didn't flinch, his mouth didn't move. The crowd whispered, trying to figure out who he was, why he was there. To them, he looked like just another tired older man caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. But then, the doors opened, and in walked a man so sharply dressed in full military uniform that even the judge sat up straighter. The medals on, his chest caught the courtroom lights. A silence fell over the room, the kind that makes your heart race. Because when a 4-star general walks into a local courtroom uninvited, something big is about to happen. And it all started 3 days earlier, with a cup of coffee, a quiet diner, and a man they called Ghost. Elijah wasn't the kind of man people noticed, not unless their car broke down or their heater stopped working. He kept to himself, walked softly, fixed things for free if he knew you couldn't pay. The kids in town called him Ghost because he seemed to just appear. One minute he was helping a neighbor carry groceries, the next, he was under someone's truck with a wrench. That evening, like most evenings, Elijah was at Miller's Diner. Same booth, same black coffee, same meatloaf special. He was halfway through his meal when a man came stumbling in, loud, drunk, angry. Behind him stood a quiet, older guy in worn-out army fatigues. His shoes were taped, his face was thin, but he held a wrinkled veteran's cap in one hand. The drunk pointed at the man in the doorway. "Nobody wants your kind begging around here," he slurred. "Go sleep it off." The room went quiet. You could hear the clink of forks hitting plates. The homeless vet tried to explain, said he just wanted coffee, that he had money. But the drunk shoved him hard, laughing as he did. That's when Elijah stood up. He didn't raise his voice, didn't say much, just walked over and offered the veteran half his sandwich. "You should go home," he said softly to the drunk. "Sleep it off." But the drunk didn't like that. Puffed up his chest, shouted something about Elijah minding his own business. Then the door swung open again. A young officer stepped in, one hand on his belt, the other pointing at Elijah. "What's going on here?" he snapped. The drunk jumped. In fast, "He threatened me, pushed me. He's violent." The waitress tried to correct him. "That's not true. He helped." But the officer wasn't listening. He walked up to Elijah, hand out. "ID, now." Elijah didn't move, his voice calm, low. "You don't want to do this." That was all it took. The officer's hand went to his holster, shouted for Elijah to get down. Elijah hesitated, looked around, saw the kids watching through the window, saw the phones recording. Then slowly, he got on the ground, laid on his stomach. Let them cuff him in front of the whole town. At the station, they booked him for resisting arrest and disturbing the peace. He said nothing, gave no resistance, just sat there like a man used to waiting. But something strange happened when they scanned his fingerprints. The computer screen flashed red. An alert popped up from the Department of Defense, a level of security the local sheriff had never seen. Still, they shrugged it off as a glitch. Tossed Elijah in a holding cell. The next morning, Detective J.D., one of the few black officers in the department, saw Elijah's name on a report. It tugged at something in the back of his mind. He started digging. But the deeper he searched, the weirder it got. Redacted files, denied access, a flag from a classified military program he'd never even heard of. That same night, hundreds of miles away, Elijah's daughter, a reporter, got a text from a number she didn't recognize. Just 3 words. They got Ghost. She dropped her wine glass, stared at the screen. Her father hadn't spoken to her in years, had missed birthdays, never called, never explained why, and now he was in jail. By the time she arrived in town, the diner video had already gone viral. People were talking, protesting, asking questions, but no one had answers. Not yet, because the truth about Elijah Rowe, the man in handcuffs, the quiet mechanic, the veteran they thought they knew, was far bigger than anyone in that courtroom ever imagined. And when the general walked in, everything changed. Forever. The night after Elijah Rowe was arrested, something strange happened at the county jail. He didn't ask for a phone call, didn't ask for a lawyer, didn't even eat. He just sat there on the edge of his bunk, eyes open, hands resting on his knees, as still as a statue. The guards kept checking in, but he never moved unless they made him. Most inmates yelled or cursed or tried to talk their way out. Not him. They started calling him the quiet one. But one young deputy, new on the job, whispered something else after his shift ended. "I think that's the ghost." He'd heard stories, old ones, from family in the military. A sniper so quiet, so accurate, so invisible that even the enemy believed he wasn't real. Some said he saved lives. Others said he disappeared after one mission that went sideways. Nobody had ever seen his face. Until now. At the same time, across the country, his daughter Maya sat in her small Atlanta apartment, staring at her phone screen. The message kept blinking. They got Ghost. It was her father. She knew it instantly. She hadn't heard from him in over a decade, but there was no mistaking it now. Something had happened. Something big. Maya wasn't just a journalist. She was a sharp one, a truth digger, a storyteller who didn't scare easy. But this hit her differently. This was personal. She started searching his name, Elijah Rowe, but the results were off. A few motor vehicle records, a blurry mugshot. Then, nothing. No military history, no service records, no pension, no medals. It was like someone had erased him from history. And Maya knew. No record didn't mean he wasn't someone. It meant someone didn't want him found. She packed a bag and drove through the night. Back in the town, word of the diner arrest had spread. The waitress who had spoken up posted a shaky video online. "This man didn't do anything wrong," she said. "He helped." Within 24 hours, the video had nearly 1 million views. Hashtags were popping up. Free the Ghost, Justice for Eli, Silent Hero, but the local sheriff's office stuck to their story. Disturbing the peace, resisting arrest, open and shut. What they didn't mention was that his fingerprints had flagged. A top-level alert from the Department of Defense, one so serious that their computer locked up until someone manually overrode it. Detective J.D. Dree, a seasoned black detective who had always trusted his gut, got curious. He wasn't part of the arrest, but when the alert popped up again during shift handoff, he pulled the report and ran a deep background search. It came back almost blank. That didn't sit right. Even people trying to stay off the grid leave digital. Crumbs. But Elijah's trail ended in places JD wasn't even allowed to look. Every government database either blocked him or spat out access denied. Then he tried calling in a favor, an old army buddy now working at Veterans Affairs. When JD said the name Elijah Rowe, there was a pause. Then, "Walk away from this one, man. Some ghosts are better left alone." That's when JD knew. This wasn't just a local mistake. Something serious was buried here. Something national. That morning, Maya walked into the sheriff's department, badge from her press credentials around her neck. She was calm, direct. "I'm here to speak to the sheriff about Elijah Rowe." The deputy behind the desk blinked. "Ma'am, that's an ongoing investigation." "Right," Maya replied, typing something into her phone. "So, I'll be writing that he refused to comment on civil rights violations involving a decorated veteran. That's the story now." The deputy looked nervous. Behind the scenes, people were watching, not just in town, in Washington, at a quiet military office deep inside the Pentagon. A red phone rang. A man in uniform answered, and all he said was, "He's been found." Upstairs, in a war room where photos never left the walls and files were stored behind retina scanners, a general stared at a name on a screen. Rowe, Elijah J. Status, Black Echo clearance level, eyes only. The general stood up and said to his aide, "Get the car, we're going to Alabama." Back at the jail, Elijah remained still. When the guard asked if he needed anything, Elijah finally spoke. Just 4 quiet words. "Tell them I'm waiting." The first thing Maya noticed when she walked into her childhood home wasn't how dusty it was or how small it felt. It was how silent it was. Her father's house was just like she remembered, clean, quiet, and almost empty. No family photos. No personal keepsakes, just tools, books, and a kitchen with the bare essentials. It felt less like someone lived there, and more like someone was passing through. In the corner of the living room was a small wooden box. She'd never seen it before. It wasn't locked, just old. Inside were only a few things. A faded photo of a younger Elijah in military dress, a newspaper clipping with most of the article blacked out, and an envelope with her name on it. She hesitated, then opened it. One sentence, handwritten. Wars don't end, they just change names. No greeting, no goodbye, just that. That same night, back at her motel room, Maya started calling every contact she had, sources, veterans, military bloggers, even conspiracy theorists. Most hung up or didn't answer. But one man called back. He didn't give a name, just said, "You're Elijah Rowe's daughter?" she confirmed. "He's not just a soldier. He was the soldier." Maya blinked. "What do you mean? You ever heard of Operation Black Echo?" She hadn't, but the name hit like a cold wind. The man continued, voice low. "It was off books, no official records. They sent in a sniper unit into Sierra Leone, not just to neutralize a warlord, but to observe something. Something that never should have been happening." Maya scribbled everything he said. Most of it sounded impossible, like a movie script. But then he said something she couldn't ignore. "Your dad disobeyed orders to save civilians. Kids. They told him to stay silent or they'd bury him." That line stayed with her. The next morning, she went digging again, this time not online. She went door to door, veterans in the area, people her father had helped over the years. It was at Pete's garage that she met a man named Willis, a former Marine who'd once served with Elijah. He looked uncomfortable when she mentioned, "Her father's name. You his daughter?" he asked, staring into his coffee. "Yes," she said. "He's in jail." Willis shook his head slowly. "He doesn't belong in there. He belongs on a monument." "What happened out there?" Maya asked. He looked at her, long and hard. Then he said, "Your father broke the rules and saved lives doing it." She leaned in. "What rules?" Willis sighed, like he was pulling the words from a locked place in his soul. "Black Echo was supposed to be clean, quick. We were told we were taking out a terrorist cell, but when we got there, it wasn't that. There were civilians, dozens of them, most already sick. Sick how? I don't know. Skin rashes, bleeding, kids coughing up blood. Something was wrong. But the orders didn't change. Our CO told us to wipe the place clean and leave no one behind, including witnesses." Maya's stomach turned. "Elijah." "Refused," Willis said. "He fought with our commander, said we weren't soldiers if we followed those orders. Then he took off, alone, and came back with 47 people. Civilians. Carried a little girl on his back the whole way." Maya sat still. "And the government?" she whispered. "They didn't want heroes," Willis said. "They wanted silence." That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She opened her laptop and wrote the words Operation Black Echo into her search bar again. Still nothing official. No reports, but she did find an old forum post buried deep. A thread titled, "What Happened to the Ghost Sniper?" It had 12 replies, all anonymous. Soldiers, operators. They all described a man who never missed, never spoke, and always came back alone. One reply stood out. If he's in the news, someone's scared, because Ghost doesn't show up unless someone else already messed up. Meanwhile, back at the jail, Elijah still hadn't spoken much. But something changed when Detective JD came in for another visit. JD sat across from him, arms crossed. "I made some calls," he said. "And I gotta tell you, you got ghosts chasing your name." Elijah looked up for the first time. JD continued, "I don't know what happened out there, but I think the wrong person's behind bars." Elijah leaned back. His voice was quiet, but firm. "You think too loud? They'll come for you too." JD nodded. "Yeah, they already tried." That same moment, miles away, at a Pentagon office, deep underground, a meeting was happening behind closed doors. And on the table were two photographs, one of Elijah Rowe and the other of Maya. A voice said, cold and steady, "We need to contain this, before they dig up what we buried." The courtroom was packed, not with reporters or cameras, those weren't allowed in yet, but with locals. Some had come because they were curious, some came because they were angry, and a few came because they just couldn't believe what they'd seen in that diner video. Elijah sat alone at the defense table, still cuffed, still silent. He wore the same jail blues they'd thrown on him when they booked him. His hands were rough, his eyes darker than the storm clouds gathering outside. He hadn't asked for a lawyer, but they'd given him one anyway, a young public defender who looked like he was in over his head. Judge Langston glanced at the files, then at the man sitting in front of him. Nothing made sense. Resisting arrest? Disturbing the peace? The footage didn't show aggression. It showed calm, controlled movements. Something about the whole thing felt off. The prosecutor leaned into the microphone. "Your Honor, we request a brief delay in these proceedings as we await additional federal guidance related to the defendant's background." That's when the door opened. It didn't slam. It didn't creak. It just opened. And in walked a man in full dress uniform, his shoes shining like mirrors and 4 silver stars on his shoulders. Everyone turned. Even the judge froze mid-sentence. The man didn't look around. He didn't need to. His presence filled the room like thunder. He walked to the front, handed something to the bailiff, and spoke, clearly and calmly. "General Douglas Whitmore, requesting permission to address this court." The name dropped like a weight in the silence. Someone gasped. A few whispered. Whitmore was known, decorated, respected, a man who didn't show up for just anything, let alone a small-town case no one could make sense of. Judge Langston narrowed his eyes. "This is highly irregular." Whitmore nodded. Once. "So is locking up a man who saved my life." The courtroom erupted. The judge slammed his gavel. "Order! Sit down or I'll clear the gallery." People settled, but their eyes didn't leave the front of the room. The judge leaned forward. "General Whitmore, you're saying you personally know the defendant?" "Yes, Your Honor. I served alongside Staff Sergeant Elijah Rowe for 7 years." That was the first time Elijah looked up. His eyes locked with the general's. "No salute. No words, just recognition." Whitmore continued. "He's not just a veteran. He's one of the most skilled operatives I've ever commanded. And what you're doing to him is wrong." The prosecutor stood up. "Your Honor, I object." "Sit down, counselor," the judge snapped. "General, continue." Whitmore placed a single folder on the table beside him. "Operation Black Echo. You won't find it in your system, because it was classified beyond your pay grade. But these are the declassified fragments we've pulled, now that someone forced our hand." He looked around the room. His voice never rose, but somehow every word hit like a drum. 15 years ago, Sergeant Rowe was sent to Africa to neutralize a threat. But what he found wasn't a war zone. It was a nightmare. Civilians used as test subjects, villages burned. And when he disobeyed orders to protect the innocent, they erased him, stripped him of everything but silence. The judge stared at the documents, hands trembling slightly. "You're telling me this man is a national hero," Whitmore finished, "and you've got him in chains." Elijah finally spoke. Just one line. "I told them this would happen." The courtroom shifted. People were no longer unsure. They were angry. Outside, a small group had gathered, veterans mostly, holding signs. "Free the ghost. He served. Now, serve him justice." News vans had started circling. Maya stood at the edge of the crowd, phone in hand, eyes locked on the courtroom windows. Inside, the prosecutor scrambled to regroup. "Your Honor, these claims, while dramatic, lack context. If this truly is a national security matter, then it shouldn't be handled in this courtroom." Whitmore turned slowly. If that's true, then why wasn't he protected before? Why did a local officer with a record of misconduct get to put a man like this on the ground, face down, in front of children? The judge took a long breath. He looked at Elijah, then at Whitmore. "This case is above my level. But what I do have the power to do is drop these local charges, effective immediately." The room buzzed. The gavel came down. Elijah was to be released. His cuffs came. Off people clapped. Some cried. Maya watched it all from the courthouse steps. When Elijah walked out the doors, flanked by deputies and still looking more soldier than civilian, she almost didn't recognize him. Then their eyes met, for the first time in 15 years. But just as she stepped forward, ready to speak, two black SUVs pulled up, doors opened, and two federal agents stepped out. "Elijah Rowe," one said, holding up a folder. "You're under arrest for unauthorized disclosure of classified intelligence. Espionage Act, Title 18, Section 793. The crowd shouted. Maya screamed. Elijah didn't flinch. He just looked at Maya and said the only thing that mattered, "It's not over." Then he turned and let them take him again. They didn't take him to a local station. They didn't even take him to a federal courthouse. They took Elijah Rowe in a black SUV with no plates, no windows, and no conversation. One of the agents kept glancing at him like he was radioactive. The other didn't even breathe too loud. Elijah sat in silence like a man who had done this before. Like someone who already knew the routine. They drove for hours, no phones, no stops. By the time they arrived, night had fallen. But this place didn't sleep. Massive gates, armed guards, cameras that tracked every angle. It looked like a regular warehouse from the outside. But Elijah knew better. This wasn't a jail. This was containment. Back in town, Maya stood frozen on the courthouse steps. Her father had just been freed, and then taken again. Not for resisting arrest or disturbing the peace, but for espionage. She didn't even understand how that was possible. He wasn't a whistleblower. He hadn't said a word. So what exactly was he guilty of? She rushed back to her motel room and made one call. Not to her editor. Not to her mother's side of the family. She called Zuri, a former hacker she once profiled who now worked as a digital investigator for underground nonprofits. "I need help," Maya said. Zuri didn't hesitate. "You bring bourbon, I bring a laptop." Meanwhile, at the federal holding site, Elijah was led down a long gray hallway with no sound but the echo of boots. His cell had no bed, no window, just a bench, a sink, and a camera in every corner. They didn't book him. They didn't fingerprint him, because they already had his prints. What they wanted now was what he remembered. The man who finally walked into his room looked clean, polished. Civilian suit, government badge. The kind of man who called himself an advisor and never gave his real name. "We need to talk," he said, pulling up a chair. Elijah didn't look at him. "You're not being charged," the man said. "Not yet. You're being held under national security protocols. You know how this works." Elijah stared at the floor. "You were supposed to disappear," the man added, voice low. "You were given an honorable discharge, a quiet life. You were supposed to take that deal and stay gone." Still no response. The man leaned in. "But now your daughter's making noise. A little too much noise." Elijah's jaw tightened, just slightly. The man smiled faintly. "You care. That's good. Makes it easier to control you." Then he stood. "We'll talk again." At the motel, Maya sat across from Zuri, who had already hacked into 2 government databases and was halfway through the 3rd. "This man of yours," Zuri said, eyes on her screen, "is a ghost. And not in the cute spy movie way. I mean Digital Zero. His military record is sealed tighter than nuclear codes." "Because of Black Echo," Maya said. Zuri nodded slowly. "Yeah, I found fragments of it, just whispers on old servers. But I can tell you this, whatever it wasn't just some mission. It was a project." Maya leaned forward. "What kind of project?" Zuri tapped a key, pulling up an old scanned memo. "This one's from 2009. It's redacted, but there's enough left to figure it out." Words appeared on the screen. Subject response. "Test location confirmed biological viability in field environment. 83% civilian variable. Stable." Maya's stomach turned. "They were testing something," Zuri said. "On people." "On villagers," Maya whispered. "And my father stopped it." Back at the federal site, Elijah was woken in the middle of the night by loud buzzers. 2 guards escorted him, no explanation, down another hallway, this one colder than the last. They brought him to a windowless room with metal chairs and no cameras. A man in a military uniform was already waiting. Not just any man. "Colonel." Aaron Klein. Elijah stopped walking. Klein smiled. "It's been a long time." Elijah didn't respond. Klein folded his hands. "You really should have stayed retired." "You should have gone to prison," Elijah replied quietly. Klein chuckled. "Always the righteous one, even now. You think because a few reporters sniff around, this all comes crashing down? You think a girl with a blog and a hacker with a laptop can take us down?" "She's not alone," Elijah said. Klein's smile faded. "No," he said. "But you will be." Then he nodded to the guards. "Sedate him." Back in town, Detective J.D. Dree knocked on Maya's motel door with a tired face and a flash drive in hand. "I pulled every call log from that officer who arrested your dad," he said. "Guess what? 2 days before the arrest, he made a call to a number that traces back to a federal contractor with links to Klein's security team." "They sent him in," Maya realized. "It wasn't random." J.D. nodded. "Your dad didn't get caught by accident. He was set up." In D.C., General Whitmore sat alone in his office, watching the chaos unfold on private screens. He'd warned them years ago. He'd begged the higher-ups not to bury Elijah Rowe, not because he feared the truth getting out, but because he knew the cost of silence. Now that silence was breaking. And if they weren't careful, it would bring down the whole house of cards. He picked up the phone. "Activate the emergency file," he said, "and get me the Attorney General." The next morning, Maya opened her inbox and found a single message. "No, sender, no subject." Inside was a video file. She clicked play. On the screen was a man, maybe in his 50s, pale, tired. "My name is William Foster," he said. "Former intelligence analyst. I worked with Colonel Klein and Elijah Rowe during Operation Black Echo. What I'm about to say will likely cost me everything, but I can't stay silent anymore." Maya froze. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone, because what was coming next was the truth they were trying to bury for good, and it had just been placed in her hands. The video Maya received didn't buffer. It didn't need time to load. It came through like it had been waiting to be seen. The man on screen was pale, breathing hard, like he knew every word might be his last. "My name is William Foster," he said again. "I was part of the team that designed the mission parameters for Black Echo. I was told we were going after a bioterrorist. I believed that. I believed in my work. But what I saw..." He stopped, swallowed, looked off camera like someone was listening. "What I saw was the US military running tests, not collecting intel, but testing something on people, civilians, farmers, women, children. The worst part? It worked." The screen went black. Then a single line of text. "If you're seeing this, I'm probably already dead." Maya sat frozen, her fingers over her mouth. She stared at the words on her screen long after they disappeared. 3 days later, William Foster's death was announced. Single car crash, wet road, driver lost control. Only it hadn't rained that night. By now, the whispers around Elijah Rowe had turned into headlines. The Marine who knew too much. Black Echo, the mission that never happened. Why did the government erase Elijah Rowe? Public pressure mounted. Hashtags trended. Veterans across the country recorded videos of support, but the government stayed silent. Elijah remained locked inside a federal black site that didn't officially exist. The files Maya and Zuri had collected weren't enough to get him out. They needed more. They needed to make it political. Zuri sat in the corner of the motel room, lit by 3 screens. Her fingers flew across keys while Maya made phone calls nonstop. Press, senators, civil rights groups, former military contacts. Anyone who would listen. "This is bigger than my father," Maya said in every call. "This is about accountability, truth, honor." Meanwhile, Zuri cracked deeper into the Pentagon's secure systems. Her eyes widened. "Maya, they're moving him." "What do you mean?" Zuri spun the laptop around. A transport order had been filed. High priority, encrypted. Location, unknown. Time, next morning. Notes. Risk of exposure increasing. Proceed with silent protocol. Maya knew what that meant. They weren't just moving him, they were planning to erase him. For good. The next few hours blurred. Maya made more calls, sent the documents and video to every major news outlet. Some ignored it. Some asked for official confirmation. But one national network bit, and by midnight, the story had exploded. Government transporting decorated Marine without trial? What are they hiding? Crowds began forming outside federal buildings. Protesters carried signs with Elijah's face and 3 words beneath it. "Let him speak." Zuri grinned. Now it's toxic. They can't touch him without setting fire to the whole system, but they tried anyway. At 4:35 a.m., the lights flickered in Elijah's cell. A soft hum filled the room. The cameras blinked, just once, and then went dead. The door opened. A man in a tailored suit stepped inside, briefcase in hand. "I'm your lawyer," he said. Elijah didn't move. "You're not," he replied calmly. The man opened the briefcase slowly. Inside, not papers, but a small black syringe. Whatever happened next was quick, but not quick enough. The camera blinked back to life just in time to catch Elijah moving like lightning, pinning the attacker's hand to the table and slamming his head against the steel guard stormed in. The man was unconscious. Elijah sat calmly, blood on his knuckles, and said, "Next time, send someone I didn't train." The footage leaked before sunrise. The internet exploded. The media flipped the story on its head. This wasn't a rogue Marine anymore. This was a cover-up. In Washington, General Whitmore had had enough. He marched into the Department of Justice with a folder thick enough to break a desk. He demanded an emergency injunction to halt Elijah's transfer. For what reason? The judge asked. Whitmore laid it out. The arrest, the sealed records, the assassination attempt. Because if he dies, Whitmore said, the truth dies with him. That afternoon, a federal judge signed the order. All transfers were to be stopped immediately. Within hours, Elijah was released from the black site, surrounded by federal marshals, journalists, and protesters. He walked out thinner than before, tired, but alive, and waiting for him at the gates was Maya. For a moment, they just stood, there. No words. Then she stepped forward and hugged him. He didn't say thank you. He just whispered, I'm proud of you. But the danger wasn't over. Across the country, in a dark office hidden in a D.C. tower, Colonel Aaron Klein stared at a monitor. His eyes didn't blink. His jaw didn't move. He just watched as Elijah Rowe walked free. Then he stood and made a single call. Go to Phase 3, he said. No more warnings, no more loose ends. What about the daughter? Klein stared. Out the window. She's more dangerous than him now. That night, Maya's motel door creaked open. Not forced, not broken, just unlocked. She heard it just in time. By the time she grabbed the lamp and swung, the figure was already halfway, across the room, but it wasn't an attacker. It was Detective J.D., bruised, limping, blood on his shirt. They got to me, he whispered. They were looking for you, for a drive, coordinates or something. Maya helped him up. You okay? I will be. Then he pulled a letter from his jacket. Your dad left this in holding, said you'd know what to do. Maya opened it. Inside, a single sentence. When the system breaks, don't beg it to heal. Break it louder. And below that, a string of numbers. Coordinates. Not just any coordinates. Buried proof. Bodies. Evidence that couldn't be explained away or redacted. Zuri looked over her shoulder. If what's at that location is what I think it is. Maya nodded. We end it. They came for the trial like it was history in the making, because it was. Media vans lined the blocks. Protesters stood shoulder to shoulder with veterans. Students held handmade signs. Elderly men in faded uniforms stood at attention in silence. Inside the federal courthouse, the room was full before sunrise. Not just journalists and lawyers, but citizens. People who had followed the story from the first blurry diner video to the bombshell documents leaked across the world. DCI. The defense table sat Colonel Aaron Klein, still wearing that smug, untouchable expression, even in prison orange. But it didn't look as confident now. Just stubborn, like a man watching his lies melt under the lights. At the witness table sat Elijah Rowe, dressed simply, no medals, no uniform, just a man with nothing left to lose, and everything to finally say. The judge entered. The gallery stood, and so began the final reckoning. The prosecutor stood first. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not just here to try one man. We are here to face what was done in our name. The weapons, the cover-ups, the silence. But we can't do that until we hear from the man who broke that silence. He turned to Elijah. You may proceed. Elijah stood slowly, steady. I was a Marine for 17 years. I followed orders. I believed in service. I believed in sacrifice. But nothing prepared me for what I saw in Sierra Leone. The room leaned in. We were told we were stopping a threat. But when I got to the village, it wasn't a war zone. It was a lab. People were sick, dying. There were soldiers with notepads, taking notes, watching it happen, like it was science, not murder. He paused. I was ordered to eliminate everyone. No survivors. That included kids. Babies. A murmur rippled across the courtroom. The judge quieted it with a firm hand. I couldn't do it, Elijah continued. So I ran. I evacuated 47 people. I brought back evidence. I handed it to command. I thought the truth would save them. He looked across the room, right at Klein. But instead, they buried it. And they buried me with it. Maya sat in the front row, holding a printed copy of the coordinates Elijah had etched into his cell wall. She had given them to an international war crimes team. Days before the trial, they excavated the site in Sierra Leone. What they found changed everything. Mass graves, test samples, chemical canisters marked with serial numbers that matched U.S. government contracts. Photographs of the dig were entered into evidence. Even Klein, with all his arrogance, shifted in his chair when those photos appeared on screen. When it was Klein's turn to speak, his lawyers tried to paint him as a patriot, a man under orders, following protocols to protect the nation. But the court didn't buy it, especially not after Amari Nguvu took the stand. She was the little girl Elijah had spared. Now a human rights attorney, she spoke in calm, clear tones about that day. How she'd pointed a gun at a soldier, and how he had given her water instead of death. How she had hidden and watched him carry her wounded friends out of the village, one by one. I was a child soldier, she said. But I was still a child, and he saw me. She turned to Elijah and spoke softly in her native language. You gave me life. He nodded once. Nothing needed translating. By the end of the second day, the nation had stopped scrolling and started listening. General Whitmore gave testimony too, confirming everything. Operation Black Echo, the cover-up, the threats, the pressure to stay silent. When asked why he was coming forward now, he said, "Because silence almost cost a good man his life. And it cost others far more." The judge recessed for deliberation, but the public had already decided. They believed Elijah. They believed Maya. They believed the ghosts of Sierra Leone. And when the verdict came, guilty on all charges, the room didn't cheer. It didn't erupt. It just breathed, like the whole country had been holding its breath for years. A month later, Elijah received an invitation to the White House. He wore a suit borrowed from a friend. Maya walked beside him, her press badge tucked away. In the Rose Garden, the president placed a blue velvet box in his hands. "Elijah Rowe," he said, "we owe you more than a medal, but today we begin by giving you one." Elijah opened the box, looked at the medal, then looked up. "I don't need this," he said quietly. "But if you want to honor me, fund the school Amari's building in Sierra Leone. Name it after the kids they never counted." The president nodded. Done. Months passed. Maya launched the Rowe Foundation, a nonprofit supporting whistleblowers and veterans who had been silenced. Zuri joined as head of cybersecurity. JD handled field investigations once his ribs healed and the bruises faded. Their first case? A drone operator who had been held in secret for leaking civilian casualties footage. They got him released within 3 weeks. Elijah didn't join the foundation. He returned home, fixed cars, helped neighbors, said little. But every Thursday, he visited a new community center just outside town, one that had been renamed the Ghost's Haven, a place for veterans with PTSD to rest, talk, and heal. Sometimes, he talked. Sometimes he just sat with people who needed to not be alone. One day, a boy came up to him, maybe 12 or 13, shy, nervous, holding a wrench in his hand. "Mr. Rowe," he said, "can you teach me how to fix things?" Elijah smiled. "I can teach you how to take it apart first." In Sierra Leone, the school opened with a small ceremony. A stone plaque near the entrance read, "For those who were never supposed to be remembered." Inside, a photo of Elijah hung on the wall. Not in uniform, not with a gun, just him, kneeling. Beside a small child, showing him how to hold a camera instead of a weapon. 1 year later, Maya stood on a small stage in New York, accepting the Pulitzer for her reporting on Operation Black Echo. "This award isn't just about my father," she said. "It's about what happens when good people are told to stay silent, and what can happen when they speak anyway." She held up the medal, then lowered it slowly. Truth doesn't need a microphone. Sometimes it just needs someone brave enough to carry it forward. That night, Maya and Elijah sat together on her small apartment balcony, overlooking the city skyline. "It's over," she said. "No," he replied. "It's just quieter." Then he looked at her, eyes soft, steady. "You brought me back." Maya shook her head. "No. You came back because you never stopped being who you were." She reached into her bag and handed him the old note he once left her. "Some wars don't end. They just change names." He looked at it, then looked at her. "They end," he said softly, "when someone tells the truth loud enough." And finally, for the first time in his life, he smiled without fear.